A trusted family babysitter is the last person to see a young child before a mysterious incident changes everything. At first, the explanation seems simple, but as investigators dig deeper, hidden secrets and strange behavior raise unsettling questions. What really happened that night, and was the truth intentionally buried? A quiet street, dimly lit by the glow of a single porch light. The sound of rain gently tapping against the pavement. A car pulls up, headlights briefly illuminating the front of a modest home. 32-year-old Rachel Dawson steps out, hood pulled over her head, her breath visible in the cold night air. She walks toward the front door, pausing for a moment before knocking. Inside, 5-year-old Ethan Miller watches from the window, small hands pressed against the glass. Security footage captures it all. The moment of arrival, the brief exchange at the door, Rachel stepping inside. For the next few hours, nothing unusual is recorded. Peaceful evening, or so it appeared. But something was about to change. Much later, when the house should have been silent, a frantic voice breaks the stillness. A call to emergency services. Desperate words, difficult to understand, but one thing is clear. Something has gone terribly wrong. Rachel's voice is panicked, her breathing uneven. Details are unclear, explanations don't quite fit. Authorities rush to the scene. The front door is unlocked, lights still on. The house is exactly as it was hours before, except for one thing. Ethan is unresponsive, and Rachel's explanation leaves more questions than answers. A trusted caregiver, someone the Miller family had known for years, now at the center of a troubling mystery. Was it an accident? A moment of carelessness? Or was there something else hidden beneath the surface? Investigators would soon discover that nothing about that night was as simple as it seemed. Rachel Dawson had been Ethan Miller's babysitter for nearly 2 years, a trusted presence in the household, someone his parents never second-guessed. That evening, she arrived on time, wearing her usual warm smile. The rain had eased into a light drizzle as she stepped inside, shaking off droplets from her coat. Ethan ran to her with excitement. He always did. Security footage from the Miller family's doorbell camera captured the familiar exchange. A hug, a quick conversation with Ethan's mother, Lauren, who reminded Rachel about bedtime and emergency contacts. Nothing seemed unusual. Inside, the evening played out like any other. Rachel made dinner, mac and cheese, Ethan's favorite. He sat at the kitchen table, swinging his feet, chattering about his day. Afterward, they played a board game in the living room. She laughed at his silly jokes, helped him count spaces on the board, and eventually led him upstairs to brush his teeth. At 8:30 p.m., Rachel tucked Ethan into bed. The room was dimly lit by a small nightlight, casting soft shadows on the walls. She read him a bedtime story, the same one he requested every night. He yawned, snuggling deeper into his blanket. A quiet, ordinary moment. The kind every parent trusts will happen when they leave their child in the care of someone they know. Rachel sent a quick text to Lauren. All good. Ethan's asleep. Have fun tonight. On the surface, everything seemed fine. But hours later, the same person who had sent that reassuring message would be making a call that no one expected. At 11:42 p.m., a frantic voice filled the phone line. Rachel's breathing was uneven. Her words hurried. She said she had just checked on Ethan and found him unresponsive. Her tone wavered between panic and confusion, as if she wasn't sure what had happened or how to explain it. The dispatcher's questions came quickly. Is he breathing? Did he fall? Did anything happen before bedtime? Rachel's responses were scattered. She kept saying she didn't know. She had only stepped away for a little while. She repeated herself, almost like she was trying to convince herself of what she was saying. First responders arrived within minutes. The house was eerily quiet. Nothing was out of place. The television was still on in the living room. A cup of tea sat half-empty on the kitchen counter. Upstairs, Ethan's bedroom door was open. Rachel stood in the hallway, arms wrapped tightly around herself, her face pale. Something about the scene unsettled the paramedics. Ethan was in his bed, just as Rachel had described. But there were small details that didn't make sense. His blanket was twisted, bunched up near his legs. His stuffed toy had fallen to the floor. And Rachel, she wasn't crying. She wasn't screaming. She just stood there, frozen. It was the first sign that something about her story wasn't quite right. Inside the quiet examination room, medical experts reviewed the findings. Something didn't match. The babysitter's explanation was simple. She had checked on Ethan, found him unresponsive, and called for help immediately. But the condition in which first responders found him suggested otherwise. Doctors noted inconsistencies. The estimated timeline didn't align with Rachel's version of events. If she had truly discovered him just moments before calling 911, certain physical signs would not have developed so quickly. Paramedics had already noticed small but significant details that could not be ignored. Meanwhile, investigators started retracing her steps. The Miller family's security footage became their first major clue. Rachel had told officers she had remained inside the home the entire night, but the camera showed something different. At 10:37 p.m., just over an hour before she made the emergency call, the front door had opened. Rachel had stepped outside. The footage captured her standing in the rain, staring down the street. She was gone for nearly 10 minutes before quietly slipping back inside. Where had she gone? Why had she left? And why hadn't she mentioned it? It was the first time investigators began to question whether Rachel's version of events could be trusted at all. Rachel's friends were the next to be questioned. Many of them described her as responsible, kind, and dependable. But in the days following the incident, something about her had changed. One friend recalled a strange conversation. Rachel had seemed distracted, nervous. She had avoided talking about that night, brushing off questions with vague answers. When pressed, she simply said, "It was awful. I don't want to think about it." Another detail raised concerns. Shortly after the incident, Rachel began deleting old social media posts. Photos from past babysitting jobs disappeared without explanation. It wasn't just one or two. Entire months of posts were erased. Then came an anonymous tip. Someone close to Rachel claimed she had been keeping a secret from the Millers. A secret she had gone to great lengths to hide. Investigators were beginning to realize that this wasn't just about one night. Something had been wrong long before the emergency call was ever made. Rachel's background was unremarkable, on paper at least. She had worked as a babysitter for years, moving between different families. Parents had always trusted her. But as investigators dug deeper, a different pattern began to emerge. This wasn't the first time something unusual had happened under Rachel's watch. Records showed that in 2 previous babysitting jobs, parents had reported strange incidents. Nothing severe enough to warrant an official complaint, but enough to cause concern. In one case, a child had been found outside late at night, wandering alone, disoriented. Rachel had said it was a mistake, that she had only turned her back for a second. In another case, a mother recalled coming home early to find Rachel behaving oddly. The house had been too quiet. The babysitter had been startled, almost as if she hadn't expected anyone to return so soon. At the time, these moments had been dismissed as harmless mistakes. But now they didn't seem so harmless anymore. Pattern was forming. And for investigators, one question remained. What had Rachel been hiding all along? Rachel had always seemed responsible, reliable, a babysitter parents could trust. But beneath that carefully maintained image, there was a side of her no one had seen. Investigators began speaking with people from her past, former classmates, old co-workers, even distant relatives. Slowly, a different picture emerged. Rachel had been struggling financially for months. She had taken on more babysitting jobs, not just to make ends meet, but to cover debts she had never told anyone about. There were unpaid bills, small loans from friends that were never repaid, and quiet withdrawals from shared bank accounts. Then there was the relationship. Friends described it as secretive, something Rachel never talked about in detail. She had mentioned a boyfriend once or twice, but no one had ever met him. Phone records showed long calls late at night, messages deleted just minutes after they were sent. The more investigators looked, the more it seemed that Rachel had been using her job to keep her life together. The Millers trusted her, paid her well, and gave her access to their home without question. But that night, something had slipped out of her control. A mistake, a moment of recklessness, or something far more deliberate. The answers were still out of reach. But one thing was certain. Rachel wasn't the person she had pretended to be. The case took a sharp turn when investigators uncovered an unsettling connection. Rachel had worked for another family 3 years earlier, the Carters. Their son, Daniel, had been under her care for nearly a year. One night, an incident occurred. The details were eerily familiar. Daniel had been found unresponsive in his crib. Rachel had called for help, sounding panicked, insisting she had no idea what had happened. Medical experts struggled to explain it. No clear cause, no signs of anything suspicious. The parents had been devastated but eventually accepted that it was an unexplained tragedy. At the time, no one had suspected Rachel. She had stayed with the family for months afterward, even attending Daniel's memorial. But now, looking back, detectives noticed something unusual. Shortly after that night, Rachel had left town. She had moved to a new city, changed her phone number, and started fresh, without telling anyone why. Was it all just coincidence? Or had something happened that Rachel had managed to hide? The case was no longer just about the Millers. The past was catching up, and for the first time, Rachel had nowhere left to run. The pressure on Rachel grew stronger. Investigators questioned her repeatedly, presenting the inconsistencies, the gaps in her timeline, the unexplained connection to Daniel's case. For months, she held her ground. She stuck to her original story, insisting she had done nothing wrong. But eventually, cracks began to show. Then, one day, she admitted something new. She had left Ethan alone longer than she had claimed. Not just for a few minutes, but for nearly an hour. She had stepped out, taken a walk, lost track of time. When she returned, something was wrong. She had panicked. She had tried to fix it, but by then, it was too late. But she denied any wrongdoing beyond that. No harm, no intention, just a terrible mistake. Her words left the family shattered. If she had lied once, how could they trust anything she said now? Had she simply been careless? Or was there something deeper she still refused to reveal? The truth remained just out of reach, hidden in the spaces between what Rachel said and what she wouldn't say. Rachel sat motionless as the courtroom filled with hushed whispers. The weight of the past year had settled into her face. Pale, tired, unreadable. Prosecutors laid out their case, presenting the evidence that had unraveled her version of events. The missing hour, the contradictions, the suspicious past. Every detail pointed to a night that was far from ordinary. But her defense team pushed back. They painted a different picture. Rachel was young, overwhelmed, caught in a situation that had spiraled beyond her control. They argued that she had panicked, made terrible choices, but had no intention of causing harm. Medical experts debated the child's condition. Was it truly the result of neglect? Or was there something else no one had considered? The jury watched her closely, waiting for signs of guilt or remorse. But Rachel remained still. No outbursts, no emotion, just quiet acceptance. Was it the silence of someone who had nothing left to say? Or someone who knew there was more, but refused to speak? Ethan's parents had avoided the cameras for months. But now, they stood before them, their grief unmistakable. They spoke about the life they had lost, the quiet moments, the laughter, the dreams that would never come true. Their voices cracked as they described the night everything changed. But one question haunted them most. Why had Rachel lied? Why had she held onto a story that fell apart with every new discovery? If it was just a mistake, why not admit it? The betrayal cut deeper than anything else. They had trusted her, welcomed her into their home, given her responsibility over the most precious part of their lives. And now they would never have the answers they needed. Public opinion remained divided. Some saw a reckless babysitter who had let things go too far. Others believed there was a truth she had buried, something no trial or investigation had uncovered. Rachel refused interviews. No statements, no explanations. The silence left an eerie feeling, as if the final piece of the puzzle remained just out of reach. Did she truly have nothing more to say? Or was she keeping a secret that would never be revealed? Long after the trial ended, the questions remained. Could this have been prevented? Were there signs that had gone unnoticed? Friends and family had described Rachel as kind, responsible, and dependable. Yet, beneath that familiar image, something had been overlooked. Trust is fragile. It is given easily but shattered in an instant. People let others into their homes, their lives, believing they truly know them. But how much do they really see? How many small moments, quiet hesitations, and uneasy glances are dismissed as nothing? Ethan's parents replayed those moments endlessly, wondering if something had been there all along. A warning they hadn't recognized. But hindsight brings no comfort, only regret. Rachel's silence lingered like an unfinished sentence, leaving the world to wonder. Was this truly just a terrible mistake? Or was there a truth buried too deep to ever surface? The case may be closed, but the debate is far from over. Was this a tragic accident? Or is there something more that will never be uncovered? The truth may never be fully known, but one thing is certain. Trust can be broken in an instant, and the people closest to us may hold secrets we never expect. What do you think? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And coming next, a family admired by everyone, with a story that seemed picture-perfect. But beneath the surface, a secret waited, one that no one could have imagined. Stay tuned.